I guess I should just share my screen.
Yeah, I think that should be fine. Let me pin you.
Okay, share. Okay.
And I'm gonna...
We're all good, right? We can see the screen and everything.
I can see your screen.
Yeah. Okay, great. So today I'll be talking about a project I've been working on for about a year now. I quit my regular coding job last summer, and I've been working on this. It's like a startup. It's called EcoRate, and this isn't going to be just like an infomercial for the startup, but just to explain real quick, it's basically like a ratings platform for businesses. For right now, it's just applying to cafes, and it's rating them based on how eco-friendly they are, as opposed to like, you know, how good they are, whatever. So, so anyway, this is a private repo, but I'm going to walk us through it a bit. And I really wanted to look at Mapbox as one of the, basically the core dependencies of this project. Sorry if it's kind of noisy. It's noisy in my apartment, and it's not in my apartment building. Not a whole lot I can do about it. Anyway, this is the website. So, you know, I have it hosted on ecorate.eco, but that actually forwards to where I have it, which is as an EcoRate, sorry, a Heroku app. So anyway, so it's basically, you know, each one of these little coffee cups is a cafe, and they have different ratings. And there's this little legend which tells you that, like, basically the bigger and greener it is, the better score it has. And, you know, there are some other details. But so this is like the map, it's the landing page. There's kind of a lot of detail to get into. It's kind of neat how you can have this base map, and there are different base styles you can have. And basically with Mapbox, you can change anything you want, basically. Like you could change the color of the water or the highways or whatever. You could change the density of the labels and things like that. So, but what I want to just talk about today, since this is a very short talk, is just one feature that I kind of like of Mapbox, which is that, you know, as you zoom in and out, these different icons are going to collide, and you can control what they do when they collide. So if we look at this one here, this kind of big one, you can see that as you zoom in, there's another one that's close to it, but that doesn't have as good of a score. And so I've set it up so that as you zoom out, it only keeps the one with the higher score. So, so I just thought that we could take a look at this feature in a little more detail, and, like, you know, what the coding is behind it. So this is the same site, but this is me just projecting from localhost so that I can mess with it, you know, programmatically. So here we've got the code for the map. And so, you know, we could get into Mapbox and how it works and everything. But basically, what I've done is I've just superimposed what they call a tile set over the top of a base map style. And then I do a bunch of changes. Basically, I define a bunch of layout and paint properties. And so if you go to the, sorry, with the Zoom thing, it's blocking my, I can't see my regular windows. So anyway, so if you go to the Mapbox API online, you can, you know, look at the style specification, and if you look at the layers, and what we're going to be talking about today is symbol, which is basically like the little icons you've added. You can control all of these different variables, you know, all of these different properties about each point. So that's what we're going to be. So anyway, let's get back to it. So basically, if you want to allow overlap, this is one of the things. Do you want your icons to be able to overlap? And so right now, in this, where did it go? In this local host, they are not allowed to overlap. So that means that as two collide, you only keep one. And so you can see that as you zoom out and they collide, you're only keeping one. But you'll see here, actually, we're keeping the lowest score right now, which is like the grayer ones. So that doesn't really make sense. So, so there's kind of two properties you have to change. So we don't want it to overlap, but we also get to choose what is the property that decides, what wins. And so right now, I'm using the rating of each data point. And when you don't let them overlap, it's a little confusing. So when you don't let them overlap, it favors the lowest thing, which is sort of counterintuitive. So what we need is a different expression for the symbol sort key, so the key that sorts it. So instead of saying that we're going to get the rating property, we're going to actually call it an expression. And so we're going to multiply -1 by the rating property. And these Mapbox expressions are a little hard to read at first, but basically they're nested expressions and they use brackets, to nest the things. You kind of get used to it after a while. But anyway, so now we can take a look at that. And this is recompiling. So this should be good if we refresh. So now, this is actually not where I live, but it's just, I'm doing this presentation over, that's where it's detecting my location. Sorry, so now this is keeping the highest rated one. So you see this is actually, if you zoom out super far, you see like the highest rated cafe in New York City. And that's this one that we were looking at originally. So that's pretty good. Ooh, I zoomed out too much. Sorry, that's my browser zoom. Anyway, so, but the problem is that sometimes, you should be able to see two cafes that are really close to each other. And you can't tell, but I can tell that some of them are not showing up even when you're zoomed in a lot. So we're going to make one more change. What we want to do is say that, okay, we're going to not allow it to overlap if it's zoomed out, but we will allow them to overlap if you're zoomed in. And Mapbox has 22 layers of zoom. And so what we're going to say is we're going to use a step function. And the step is going to be from 0 to whatever layer of zoom. Like basically from 0 to 14, you can't overlap. And then from 14 to 22, you can overlap. But the rules for the symbol sort key change. So anyway, so we could just look at that. Need to refresh here. Okay, so now we should see a change at the level of zoom of 14. So that is, we're less than 14 now, and so 14 is right around here. So let's see, are these overlapping? There are two that overlap up here. Okay, so here you can see this orange one. Orange means unrated. And this one, which is rated, they are overlapping. But when you do allow overlap, the symbol sort key is reversed in the sense that it favors the highest, which is kind of annoying because when you don't allow overlap, it favors keeping the lowest score thing. So now we need to also change, this was working when we were not allowing them to overlap, and this was what we were choosing, how we were choosing, what would be kept. But now basically we need to do another step function for the symbol sort key, and we need to say up to a level of zoom of basically 14. We're going to do it where it's, -1 times the rating. And beyond level of 14, we're going to just use the rating. And so this should work like we would expect it to. And so we can take a look at this one more time. And now Let's take a quick look. So if we're zoomed out really far, now it's keeping the best one. But if we zoom in more, does it allow them to overlap? Okay, so now we can see that these two are overlapping and the one that's on top is the better scoring one. So, okay, so that is, we finally, that was the objective. So that is just like a quick rundown of, just an example of a sort of like a little Mapbox kink I had to work out. And, it's really great using this Mapbox library. So I can definitely recommend it if you're looking into something that has to do with mapping.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Alex.
Yeah.
If you mind, so everyone think of their questions, but if you don't mind, maybe you can hold on to them. I've heard from our second speaker that he has a hard stop at 6:30, so I want to make sure that he has time to get in and out. So thanks so much for sharing that information about Mapbox, and everyone hold your Mapbox questions. We'll definitely come back for those. And then if I could get you to stop sharing your screen, I don't know if Travis can steal that or not. There we go.
Hey.
All right. Thanks so much, Alex. It's all yours, Travis. Take it away.
Okay. Thank you, Alex. Yeah, so let me just share my screen really quickly as well. Okay, let's share. Can everybody see my desktop? All right, so I want to just demo for you guys quickly something that I put together, and I heard that there were some questions about Python and using it for web frameworks before. So what I would like to show you guys today is Splashgen. With Splashgen, you can build a landing page in 20 lines of Python. This is what it looks like. This is what you run, and this is what you get. And I want to demo this for you all by building the NYC Python meetup a landing page real quick. So the idea behind Splashgen is that for a developer, you want to build a landing page. You don't want to copy bootstrap templates all around. You don't want to like kind of cargo cult designs and you pay $80 a month for unbounce or pay, like $19 a year for card. You just want to write some simple code, get a splash page. It should be that easy. Right? So I want to show you how this works real quick by building NYC Python a splash page in hopefully the next 12 minutes. So first, can everybody see my terminal, by the way? Awesome. So let's make an NYC Python splash site. Let's spin up a virtual environment. You can see I have an old virtual environment lingering around. So have to deactivate that one and then activate the new one. All right. And then all you need to do in order to get Splashgen is pip install it. And the Splashgen works is that you write your API using Python, and then it works a lot like Flask, where it dynamically imports the module that corresponds to your script, pulls an attribute from the module that you've specified, and I'll show you how to do that in a second, and then uses that to actually like compile your script into a full-blown landing page, which is why it needs a bunch of time to install all of these dependencies. You might have been thinking to yourself, like, landing pages, they should be pretty simple. But, so that's what Splashgen is doing under the hood. But what does that look like? So I am going to spin up VS Code real quick. I'm going to make a file called web.py. And then I am going to just increase my screen size. So really, all you need to do in order to make a splash site is I'm just going to write from Splashgen import launch. And then I'm going to, from splashgen.components, I need to import components. I'm going to import a splash site. And I'm also going to import a call to action button. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to spin up a site. And I'm going to give it a title, which is what appears kind of like in the Chrome menu bar of the New York Python Meetup group. And most landing pages have like basically a headline, some subtext about what it does, and then some call to action. And so for the headline, let's just set that equivalent to the title. So it's a New York Python meetup group. For the subtext, let's make it similar to what's on the meetup page. So meet other local Python programming language enthusiasts. Let me check my spelling. Cool, that looks good. And now let's just add like a call to action to join the meetup. So I'm going to create an action button and I'm going to set it to up.com/NYC. And then I'm just going to have the text be join our meetup group. Let's see, did I get that right? I can't see over the Zoom overlay. All right, cool. Now the final thing that I'm going to do is I'm just going to run this launch command. So what launch does is it tells Splashgen, this is the Splash site that you actually build. And once this, you get 10 lines of Python. All I have to do here is run splashgen website.py, and that will build me a fully generated static site. So I don't have to write any HTML, CSS, or JavaScript, don't have to pay for anything, don't have to do anything fancy. And there you can just run an HTTP server, and you're going to want to serve out of the build directory. And if I do that, then I should see that I have a Splash page, and it's called the New York Python Meetup Group. And it looks like, yeah, there we go. So I have a default favicon. If I click this button, then it's going to take me to the meetup page. So this is a good start, but we probably want to customize it a little bit more. So for example, you might add a logo. So if I go back here, I can easily do that by just, I have a Python logo. Sorry, let me just zoom. Yeah, this is what I want. So I have a Python logo. Sorry, cool. That I just import here. And if I want to add a logo, all I do is come here and just specify the path to the logo. Now, normally, if you want to add a logo to a Splash site, you have to like add it in as an image, make sure it's responsive, and then use some favicon generator to generate a favicon. Splashgen, you don't have to do any of that. You just add this one line, you rerun and when you refresh, you now have a logo, and you also have a favicon, and that favicon is responsive across multiple browsers. So that's cool. And so it's looking better. Still a little sterile. I think a dark theme might look better here. So if you're a dark theme person like me, then all you have to do in order to get a dark theme for your landing page is just write theme is equal to dark, and then rerun, whoops. Man. And when we refresh, now we have a dark theme. So this again, in like 10, 11 lines of Python is a Splash page that you throw up in literally a matter of 10 minutes. And now you have a web presence. And the final thing I wanted to show you is that what you'll probably want as well are meta tags. So, you know, like when you share the link to NYC Python meetupgroup.com in Facebook or Twitter, you'll get like a nice rich preview. So you can do that as well with Splashgen. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to import tags from Splashgen. And then all I'm going to do is assign to the site.meta property. And let's make the title. Title is what's going to show up in the headline. So I'll just put the headline. And then we're going to have the description, which we could basically set to the subtext. Now, and then we're going to have what's called a canonical URL. This would be your like production URL. So I'll make it like, let's call it nycpython.dev. And then finally, we'll add an image. Now, the image is the tricky part because the image has to point to an actual like internet. I just found a nice like Python logo that I'm going to use here. So I'm just going to add that in and generate the website again. And if I refresh, I'm not going to really see anything because it's a meta tag. The way I like to test meta tags is I use a service called Ngrok. So Ngrok's pretty cool. Basically, it creates a local tunnel between your computer and the public internet. So if I want to like test out what's on localhost 8000, I just run ngrok http 8000, and now I have both an HTTP and an HTTPS URL for my site. So now what I can do is I can go to meta.io and I can post in my site, and I can see that like my meta tags have this nice Python logo, and the title and description work just like that. So there's more things you can do with Splashgen. For example, if you are launching a startup, so the Eco Cafe startup, if you're still developing the site and you want a MailChimp sign up list where you can keep track of people who are interested in joining your beta, we have a component for that under splashgen.integrations. What I would love is if you need a Splash site spun up, to please try out Splashgen. Let me know how we can improve it. Let me know kind of like what components you would need, what layouts are missing. But that's pretty much my presentation. So thank you very much for letting me show you all that.
Great. Thanks so much, Travis. I think it's really exciting. I saw a lot of people commenting in the chat. Do you have a minute or two for some quick questions?
Absolutely. Should I stop sharing my screen or continue to share?
It doesn't matter to me.
Why don't you continue to share, and we can take your questions first since you got to go soon, in case you want to show something.
Sure.
Yeah.
Happy to answer questions.
What inspired you to make that?
Okay, that's a great question. So my startup is currently pivoting, and as part of pivoting, like we need to rapidly test out ideas. And a great way to test out an idea very quickly, we found, is just to like make a simple landing page with like some sort of call to action to get somebody to pay for it, either using, and by pay, we don't just mean money, it could be like time or reputation. So we would make a landing page that's like, you know, headline, subtext, like sign up for our, you know, early beta, you know, or become a launch partner. And basically what we would do is we would put that in front of people, ask them to like, quote unquote, pay for it. And when they said no, we would find out why. And that was a great way to iterate on the idea. And I was doing a lot of these, and I started looking at some no tools to put them together, because I was just like, even though like I'm a web developer by trade, I'm like, I just don't want to be building landing pages all the time. And I started looking at some no-code tools, and they like look good, but you had to pay for them. And like, even though you had to pay for them, it came with like all of these bells and whistles, and like you had to use like a visual designer. And I was like, I just want a landing page. So basically, I built this because I was like, I literally would rather open up a text set and write some simple Python describing what I want a landing page to be, and then just like push that out there. And that's kind of like what we did. And we were like, wow, this is way better. So we decided to open source it and get feedback from, you know, the community at large as to like whether or not this would be useful. Yeah, I think that like building pages might not be something that somebody does so frequently, but one of the things we're thinking about is like, you know, if you can spin up like an admin UI this easily, right? And it's just like everything care of for you, like, is that useful? So that's kind of like along the lines of this.
I started getting excited that maybe I could finally replace my old Jekyll static site on GitHub pages, but it's going to need a little bit more functionality than just a splash page. I'm going to need some blogging, some.
File an issue.
Awesome. Yeah. Quick question though. So how would one actually deploy this? Like if you did want to put it on GitHub pages, like when you hit build, is that going to build to HTML and CSS?
That's a great idea. Yeah. So when you Splashgen, it emits everything into a build folder. And if you go to our README, we actually have instructions on deploy to GitHub pages. We also have instructions on how you deploy to Netlify, which personally I like because you don't have to check in your build folder. But let me real quick, I will, let I stop sharing. I will link, actually, can I open the chat? Yeah, so I will link our deploying to GitHub pages instructions in the chat.
Cool. Thanks. Any other quick questions before Travis?
I will be in the Discord afterwards if anybody has any questions or wants to try it out. Thank you all so much for being present.
I just have a quick question, if you don't mind, Travis. What is your actual startup? What do they actually do? Like you're saying, this is like a side project that you built just to help you. I mean, this is really cool on its own. I was just curious what you guys do.
Yeah, so it's funny you mentioned we might pivot to something like this. We're in the midst of kind of like pivot, so figuring out, like, we had kind of like an idea and we decided to kind of pivot off of that idea. Our last idea was in the augmented reality and virtual reality space, basically Dream, Super Smash, Melee, and we would render it in 3D in a VR headset. So very cool, but like not a lot of kind of like monetization there. So we're now kind of like starting to look at other business ideas. Unfortunately, I have to run to a meeting, but like I said, I'll be in Discord after my meeting. So thank you all so much again.
Thank you. I think now, so we have 2 more speakers on the live stream signed up, and then a couple other speakers after that. If you haven't signed up yet and you want to, I'll drop the link in the chat, but I think now's a good time for us to pivot back to questions with Alex. Does anyone have any questions about the first talk?
Yeah, AJ?
Yeah, I wanted to know, what technologies did you use aside from Mapbox to build it? Is it all JS?
Yeah, it's basically all JavaScript and HTML and CSS. It's kind of a lot of CSS. Even like the logo I made out of CSS and then just like took a picture of that. Trying to think what else. I do use Python. So the database is MongoDB, and so I'm obviously saving like reviews and stuff about cafes to the database. But then to actually process those reviews and come up with a score, I download those from MongoDB into Python, and then I use Pandas, the Pandas sort of like data frame library. In Python, that's like the much more my wheelhouse, and that gets like really just like squarely with like all the data and stuff. So I was glad to be able to like have a code base that I'm more familiar with. That's the basic overview. Oh, and then Heroku to deploy the app. And then I used Ionic. I didn't mention this, but I also deployed it as a web app. So it's on Android and iOS. And I used Ionic to do that. So it's not even a native app. It's like it's really just a web app, and that gets repackaged as cell phone apps.
Cool, thank you.
You mentioned that the repo was private. Do you have code or the Heroku link that you'd like to drop in the chat?
Trying to think. I did make a public page for it, but I don't have anything interesting on there now. It's like the terms and stuff like that. But I mean, I could share the website. The website, which is just go. And on there's like on the about page, there's links to like all like the philosophy behind it. And we also have a meetup group that just like meets up to have coffee and talk about sustainability and stuff. And the links are all on there on the about page, which you get to through the menu. Yeah. I'm trying to think about like whether people would be interested. Like I don't know if like like a blog post version of my talk today would be something that people would be interested in or something. So I do want to spin out some of the things as sort of accessible. Like, I'd be happy to make most of it open source, but right now none of it is open source, and I just don't really know if there's much interest. And I'm not like internet famous or anything, so I can't just like ask Twitter, So.
Well, I'm very pro open source and I'm very pro blog post, especially if you're looking to get this kind of stuff out there or to help you in creating a portfolio of things. Blog posts are definitely a great way to go. We can talk about that more offline. So I think just to keep with time, let's go ahead and Niels, are you ready to give the next talk? All right, I'm gonna go ahead and pin you. And you can share your screen when you're ready.
Cool. Hi, everyone. I am Niels. I've sworn not to talk about Pandera, which I am the author of, but it's inevitably going to get a mention in today's talk. But so that's, sorry, that was kind of an aside. The talk I want to give today is functional polymorphism via dispatch. So first of all, what is polymorphism? It's sort of a broad concept that basically means having the same interface for different types, data types, or put a different way, using a single symbol, like a function or a class or something like that, to encapsulate a particular operation with similar semantics, potentially for different types. So a familiar example is the print function. It prints stuff to a terminal or screen or some kind of standard out. But it can take multiple types, right? So as a dynamic language, Python allows for this, and it feels pretty natural for all of us who use it on a daily basis. But I guess just to point out this familiar example, it's literally takes different types and it can handle those different types to produce the output desired. So before diving in, why am I talking about this? So there is an ulterior motive here that has to do with Pandera. So just a brief elevator pitch for Pandera. It's a data validation library. So you define a schema where you can validate pandas data frames by calling the schema object, right, and invoking it with the data frame of interest that you want to validate. So currently it only supports pandas data frames, but there has been recent requests and interest in supporting other data frame-like objects. So think Spark or Dask or cuDF data frames. And the problem that I'm still kind of batting around in my head is I have all this logic, right, that you can specify your schema, like these are the columns and these are the types and these are the value ranges or the different finite values of a particular column for categorical variables. But the problem is I have validation logic that's sort of interspersed with the schema object. So when I call schema, on the data frame, underlying that is just all the assumptions that the assumption that pandas is the data frame that you're trying to validate, and there's very specific logic that relies on the pandas API to do those checks. So this led me to try to think about how to manage that complexity if now I have to do Spark data frames and cuDF data frames and so on. Certain libraries like Dask have similar APIs to pandas, but it's not, you have to still call compute at the end to like actually compute, because it just constructs this graph and then it does the computation when you call compute. So there are like these minor or major variations in the way the validation logic would have to be implemented for these different data frames. So, I looked into different, class inheritance. So you can implement polymorphism with classes and subclasses and whatnot. This is just something that I looked into just because it seems nice and simple, and I like functions. So they're easy to reason about, So functional polymorphism, I don't know if this is actually a term, but it's just polymorphism with functions. I don't know. You can let me
Hey,
know
Niels,
if
can
that term
you
is.
zoom in a little bit
Ah,
so we can
yeah.
see your screen a little better? Thanks.
How's that? Okay, so here, this is like kind of, I would say, a hacky way of implementing polymorphism where I have a print underscore just to prevent overloading. Print underscore function that kind of does funky things before printing, depending on the type. So here I'm just using if else statements. And this works. So if it's an int, it doubles it before printing it. It's a string, it appends hello. It's a list, it'll duplicate the list. So that's fine. And we have this else here that if it's an unknown type, in this case a float, it'll blow up. So in Python, the way you can implement this, another way you can do it is you can use the Functual single dispatch decorator. And what this allows you to do is kind of decompose all the different types and have them encapsulated in their own separate functions. And Python will handle, delegating or dispatching the operation based on the type that you feed it. So here, the syntax is, you can think of this as kind of like the base function. And once I've defined this base function that doesn't take any types, it'll raise this error. So if it's an unknown type, it'll raise that error. But I can call the .register method on this print now this dispatched function, and I can change the function signature, or I can specify in the function signature what type X would be for me to do these different operations. So all the same weirdness that I implemented here with doubling ints and whatnot, just to prove to you that it works. And the same thing here, it blows up if you give it a type that you haven't implemented a function for with the dispatch register method. So what if I want to dispatch functions with multiple arguments? So this is the case with Pandera because not only do I have the data frame, but I have various constructs in Pandera that like a data frame schema or a column or an index. And I want to be able to dispatch different logic based on both the data frame type, but also the internal kind of Pandera object, right? So single dispatch only dispatches based on the type of the first argument of the function. So you can have multiple arguments, but it's gonna determine which implementation it's using based on the first argument. So there's a nice, so here I'm just kind of doing the same thing. Here's a familiar operation that's sort of polymorphic in the sense that you can add strings together and add lists together. And here I'm just implementing my own funky add function here just to prove the point where you can implement this with if-else statements. But there is this library called Plum that implements multiple dispatch that the syntax is slightly different. So so the function name actually has to be the same. So if you notice above with the Python single dispatch, sorry, Lauren, how am I on time? I don't know. I'll wrap up really quick. So if you look up here, I'm dispatching to these underscore functions, and it just says that the name of the function doesn't really matter. It's just you're just registering different implementations. Whereas with Plum, it's slightly different, but looks quite similar, where I have this base implementation that just raises an error, and then I dispatch to different implementations based on the types. So just to prove to you that this works. Yep. Yeah. So that's basically the talk. Yeah, I'm curious. I actually don't use dispatching like extensively, so this was a learning experience for me. Thanks.
Great. Thanks for Thanks so much for sharing. I'd like to open this up for questions. Any questions for
it's not a question. And I know you don't want to talk about your library, but I opened it up on GitHub and stuff like that. Looks really cool. So good work.
Thanks. There's a more mature, I would say, I guess, library called Multiple Dispatch that was actually written by, I think, the author of Dask. But it doesn't do this type signature stuff. So you have to give it the types when you call the dispatch decorator.
You're getting a couple of things in the chat, folks that aren't speaking out loud, but combining Plum with the above interface for ad hoc polymorphism would be pretty cool. And I'd love to hear about Neil's public health work, but I suppose it's off topic.
Yeah, that was a different life. But I think the high point was I was part of this nonprofit called Hip Hop Public Health. A previous life was I was like a hip hop dancer. And so the nonprofit was invited to the Obama White House to like perform. And that was like, I'd never expected to go to the White House when I went to public health school. But that was cool.
That's awesome. Now I want to hear more about your public health work. Okay, sounds good. We can continue the discussion over on Discord. Joshua, you are up. I'm going to pin you.
Cool. I want to see him dance. That's what I want to see. Personally.
Yeah, I think we could schedule that, right, for the next one of these. I think it might take more than 5 minutes though.
Yeah, next lightning talk.
Next lightning talk? Okay, sounds good.
All right, those are going to be some hard talks to top. You know, somebody making a landing page in like 5 minutes and somebody talking about like a real library. Give me a thumbs up or like raise your hand or say something. Does anyone use the new enums feature in Python? No, no one. I couldn't see anyone. All right, so, oh yeah, a few people. Sometimes they could be a little unnecessary. Sometimes you might just want to like make a constant variable or something like that, but they could be pretty nice. So what I'm just gonna like show you in a few lines is just making a slug enum. So sometimes your variables have underscores in them. And unfortunately, in the complicated world, we need to convert those underscores to dashes in order to like integrate with another system or something like that. So this enum that I have right here, if you're not familiar with enums, I'll just do a little print on some functionality that it has right now. So if I want to get the value that's associated with this location and I run it, it prints it. There's nothing cool that's going on here. But let's say I'm making a web application or something like that, and I'm storing one in the database and they're showing upper dash west dash side on the front end of the application. Like, how do we do this without like managing this in a few extra layers? And just in like a couple lines of code, I thought I did something pretty interesting. That was like a nice use case of enums. So we could just add a little class method on here that's gonna get our enum from a slug. So class method from slug, as I said. And the algorithm for getting a slug is not really that complicated. You're just gonna uppercase something and convert dashes to underscores. So in that case, what I mean is we're gonna do upper west side is going to become and the other thing, I guess, if you're not familiar with enums, is there are multiple ways to like access the data that's inside the enum. So like using them for dynamic lookup is helpful. So if I change this to upper west side, I can also access this by its literal name here. And that's sort of the feature that we're going to build in there, where we're going to generate a slug off of this name. So from here, we just return class name here. And then if I wanted to get location from a slug here, I just, without changing anything about the default enum behavior or stuff like that, I'll just pass in Upper West Side and then do dot value. Give it a nice print. And then, yeah, I mean, it's not changing, so it's not really cool. So I guess we'll do like Lower East Side just so you guys can see it's actually doing something. I hope. Yeah, too. All right, cool. Yeah, I mean, that's not really amazing. And like the last thing I guess I want to show is that enums are kind of like not standard, I guess. They do things that I guess you really have to like look at the documentation to understand how they work. And like one thing is when you're applying a property to an enum, it's actually associated with the object that you're referencing on it. And like, that's neat. It's confusing at first, but like that idea is pretty neat. So if I want to then get the slug from here, I can then create a property. So I could do at property, do slug. And then just do the reverse from the name. And then now if I do here, location dot upper west side dot slug. Now if I print this, I get my slug. And it's just a small, like few pieces, a few lines of code to like manage that back and forth. That I know I've had a bunch of sloppy code, and I wrote this and thought it would be a good lightning talk. So thank you. Any questions about this? It's like too few lines to be a library.
You could upload it as a gist though, huh? You could put it on GitHub as a gist.
This is all my company's internal everything. This is what we're based on. I can't give it away. No, I'm kidding. Yeah, I can do it.
I was curious how many people prefer to use enums like that versus just strings and are not typed. I had a debate like with a coworker about this. I don't know if it's because my initial programming background was a little bit more with stricter language like C and stuff like that. I thought it was pretty important, and it was like, no, we don't need that at all. And we came up to some agreement that we were stuck in Python 2.7. So I made something that you could still provide a string, and it would convert it internally into the proper enum. But do you guys even bother using enum? Or I kind of like it, but what about you?
I try to avoid the complexity like whenever I can. So like if I weren't getting some value out of it, and like it was just literally like a value, a variable called Upper West Side, and it didn't come from like an external source that I needed to like look up dynamically by a name, then I wouldn't go through the process. Like some interesting things, like if you try to like JSON encode an enum, unless you, and your enums are strings, unless you inherit your enum from string, then it's not going to be JSON serializable by default. I know that some libraries then like inherit from enum and take care of that for you, but I would just say like they're worth it, and they have their value, but we shouldn't be afraid of just using simple things when they're available for us.
Makes sense. Like everything else, got a bunch of options in your toolkits and use them when it makes sense.
Yeah.
All right, thank you.
Any additional questions for Joshua? All right, so this concludes the live stream portion of tonight's event. I'm gonna kill the live stream, and we've got a couple more talks. Well, we've got one more talk, and we've got 5 minutes left. So let's do this.